So this is a podcast called Dope Nostalgia. We talk a lot with people who had huge hits in the 90s and what they're doing now. And we focus on both sides of your career. Now, when you first started out as a musician, what made you decide to go down that path?
It's a great question, actually, Naomi, because I was really at 16 years old, I was going to be a soccer player. So I got into music a little bit late. It was around sort of 17 or 18 years old. And I was signed to Southampton Football Club in England, and I was like an apprentice, and I thought that's what I was going to do. That's what I cared about. But as I sort of was at the club for a while, I was getting a chance to go to all the clubs in London and hear Motown and hear the Beatles. And slowly, I really fell in love with music. And around the age of about 17 or 18, I bought a bass guitar, and that was it. As soon as I started playing the bass, I'm a big guy, so I'm like 6'4". So the bass guitar just felt good. And I realized that I wasn't going to be like a superstar at football. And I thought, it's quite strange, because as a young boy, I even thought that your football career could end around sort of 30 years old. But with a musician, music goes on forever. And my family, my parents used to buy records, and in our council estate, we used to always have parties. And as soon as we put records on the hi-fi, a magic appeared in the room, and I just thought that music had this incredible, invisible power, and I wanted to get nearer to it.
And who were some of those musical heroes that influenced you making that decision?
Well, it would have been, the Beatles, because the Beatles appeared on TV at that time. And I remember seeing Love Me Do on Top of the Pops and seeing the Beatles for the first time. And of course, that was a culture change. Mm-hmm. And of course, Motown was breaking big. So Marvin Gaye, the Supremes, all the records that were coming from America, Otis Redding, music like that. And of course, I'm a bit of an obsessive character. So I bought every record you possibly could get. I still have those vinyl records upstairs in my closet. It was every weekend I'd say to my mum, give me 7 and 6pence to go and buy a record. And that was 7 shillings and 6pence to buy a single. And I used to study the charts, and I became obsessed, because when you're holding that little vinyl record and looking at the grooves, and then you put it onto the turntable and you hear this magic appearing. I actually did think it was a magical force, and I wanted, again, as I said to you, I wanted to get nearer and nearer to it over time.
It's interesting that you say how you studied the charts. It was just like an obsession, because that's kind of how I feel about this era, and that's why I made a show like this. Yes. Your song being one of those songs that I remember very fondly, so, like the big hit. And according
what was the big hit?
In the House of Stone and Light.
Oh, that's right.
That was the big one that hit here in Canada at that time.
Yeah, thanks for reminding me. Yes, I remember. I got to tour in Canada and play some gigs, and I love Canada. I felt like I was going back to England with the people there. They were just so friendly. And in fact, on the album In the House of Stone and Light, I had a famous guitarist, Bill Dillon from Canada, who played with Joni Mitchell and Peter Gabriel. I'd met him with Robbie Robertson. I did Robbie Robertson's album. And so this Canadian influx was coming around my music, and I've got fond memories of going to Canada and playing with Canadian musicians.
That was one of the things I was going to touch on, is working with Robbie Robertson in '91, doing the album Storyville. Did you come up here and work with him on that?
No, actually, I did both albums. I did his first solo album, the Robbie Robertson album before that, his first solo one. And I wrote the opening track with him, Fallen Angel. And then I wrote Hell's Half Acre on that record. And then he called me in for Storyville, and I started a song for him called Sign of the Rainbow. But that was a very influential period for me, Naomi, because I'd been associated with pop hits. And yet I wanted to really get nearer to album-oriented music, and I wanted to just break through and play with musicians that weren't just pop-oriented, because around that time I'd had the hits with Go West, King Wishful Thinking and Faithful, and I was getting called for that a great deal, and it was all wonderful. But I just thought, I grew up on Genesis, and I grew up on progressive rock and Jethro Tull, and the funk and Parliament and Sly and the Family Stone. I just felt like there's more to me. And I was very fortunate because I didn't really know too much about Robbie Robertson in England when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. I think the band had a hit called Rag Mama Rag, and I remember buying that record, but I didn't know really the heritage of Robbie. So when I got to collaborate with him, and actually, I did a lot of the demos in this room for him, my studio at home here, and we just hit it off. And I think it was because I didn't really know his heritage with Bob Dylan and everything. So we just bounced off of each other. And Fallen Angel, I still feel today that Fallen Angel, produced by Daniel Lanois, is one of the best songs I've ever had recorded. It just feels that the emotion and the spirit of that record's really right.
Huge producer, Daniel Lanois, very well respected in this country and for all the work he's done as well. If I were to go back a little bit just to say, when you moved to Los Angeles early in your career, according to the Wikipedia, how did you tell yourself, yes, this is what I'm going to do? I'm going to the US.
Well, you know, Wikipedia, I'm not sure if any of that's really true, but
I know that's why I have
to, you know, I've looked at it a couple of times and I've thought I'm supposed to live with my 7 cats and I don't. So it's like, you know, whatever that they write. But I came to America because my father worked for British Aerospace, NASA. And so as a kid, he was always coming across to America, and I would take my holidays coming across to the States. And when I was in America as a young lad, I fell in love with American music because my father was based down south, Beaufort, South Carolina, Charleston, and I would be hearing Wilson Pickett, Parliament, Sly and the Family Stone, Brothers Johnson, and that's why I became a bass player. So in a way, you know, I just was in contact with America because my father was. And then when I eventually got back to England to make this not a Wikipedia. Oh, well, this is the true Wikipedia. This is the real story. Yes. I was still going to be a soccer player, but I'd been in America with my dad around 17 years old. And I thought, no, it's bass playing for me. I want to play the funk. I was into Stanley Clarke, Jaco Pastorius. I just wanted to be a musician. And so I joined a few bands in England, one in Bristol, one in Oxford. And then I eventually got a record deal in England, in London. And Jive Records signed myself and my partner in the band, Brian Fairweather, a Scotsman. And we made a record in the 80s called Dancing in Heaven. And that became a big club record in Los Angeles. And so I just said to Brian, we've got to go to Los Angeles. We've got to just pack up everything and get to Los Angeles and make a go of it. Well, I'm making this a long story, but really when we got to LA, Dancing in Heaven had become quite a big hit and people wanted to work with us. So that's when we knew, and I knew, that I had to stay in Los Angeles because everybody wanted that new sound, which was, you know, the Thompson Twins, Tom Dolby, Ultravox. We were a band called Q-Phil. We used new technology. So in a lot of ways, my breakthrough was in the 80s because American bands wanted to change their sound. And in fact, when I worked with Robbie Robertson on his albums, it was because I was thought of as the new kid in the block with new technology. And soon as I got to LA and it all started to bubble, I thought, I'm going to stay here. This is my new home. And here I am.
And it felt right. And there you are still today.
I still am here. I haven't moved. Just sat in this room since the 80s.
It's fantastic. And I mean, yeah, you got to be a huge part of that transition in music at that time. I also read up that you worked with a legend such as Bernie Taupin.
Yeah, I did a lot of work with Bernie. That was, again, a magical time. But again, it was because it was the same vibe that they were trying in the 80s. They were trying, the record companies wanted their artists and their writers to work with what was called the new wave. My band was thought of as a new wave band. And so Bernie Taupin wasn't working with Elton around that time. And they said, would you fancy working with Bernie Taupin? Well, again, as a music fanatic, I grew up on Goodbye Yellow Brick Road and Tumbleweed Connection. And so I just said, absolutely, I'd love to do it. I wonder if Bernie would want to do it. Bernie was interested because I was a new kind of creature out of the swamp, and he wanted to try it out. And the first 2 songs we wrote were These Dreams and We Built This City. And Bernie just sent me the lyrics up front. And you know, after we had 2 #1 songs, we thought something's happening here, and we continued to write. But that was a wonderful time, because I think as an apprentice songwriter, I felt like I was working with the professionals, in the sense I was the young kid in town. Again, like a football career, when I was an apprentice, they used to put you into the team with the pros, and you'd feel like you were working around people that had the experience. So at that time, Bernie Taupin and Robbie Robertson, and also I worked with Earth, Wind and Fire, which were one of my favorite bands of all time as a kid. So I worked with Maurice White, and between those 3 people, I felt like I was getting the best education you could possibly get in a very quick time as well. You know, very lucky, Naomi, because I had the hits with These Dreams and We Built This City, and again, it made me say, I'm staying.
Yeah, another
in this
reason.
studio, and I'm not going to leave. So yeah, Bernie became a really close friend, and you know, he's one of the greatest lyricists of all time. So I was very fortunate that when I was writing music in LA, people started to think that I was just the music man, and so they would just send me lyricists. And Hal David I worked with, and some of the John Bettis from the Carpenters, some of the greatest lyricists. So I was getting an education which was, you know, really unreal. And I think at that point, early 80s, I made a huge leap in understanding music better, and became a professional at that time from working with these guys. And then I think in the 90s, which your show's about, is when I really got it out, but particularly as a solo artist as well.
Yes, no, that's like fantastic that you got those incredible opportunities to work with those songwriters. And you as a songwriter, do you prefer in your writing process to collaborate, or do you like writing songs on your own as well?
Again, that's a great question, because in the early years, collaboration was the way you broke through. You had to work with many people. And through the 80s, I was working with, my manager was telling me I was working possibly with 3 artists a day. And my studio here, where I put in a 24-track studio, and I became a bit of an engineer as well. So collaboration was everything. And so you looked at artists like Paul Young and like Go West, and you thought, if you write with them, you're going to get on the album, because the artists, they want to write with you. They want to get their songs on the album.
Yeah.
So not only was it a way of me learning, it was a way to get my songs out and being recorded. So collaboration was fantastic. But then at the end of the 80s, I was a little bit sick and tired of it. I thought, I'm not getting out what I need to do. And I've been given confidence by working with Robbie Robertson and Bernie and Earth, Wind and Fire. They were just saying, why don't you do your own thing? Because I always did the demos and sang them myself, and just thought I was singing to portray what it should be. But then some of the artists said, you've got a pretty good voice, you should make a record. And I thought, yeah, no big deal. I'm just trying to portray the song. And then eventually my manager, Diane Poncher, who'd been with me for a long time, she said, it's about time you made your own record. And that's when I did In the House of Stone and Light. And over the years, I've enjoyed writing on my own slightly better than I have with other people, because you just get set in your ways. You just say, I don't have to be a politician here. If I believe in this, I'm going to do it. And I don't have to try and please 3 or 4 or 5 different people. So I enjoyed the collaboration in the early years, but now I like doing it on my own.
Isn't that great? In the House of Stone and Light was a fantastic album. The single takes off. What opportunities did that provide you at that time to market your own music, your own solo album?
Unreal time, really. Unreal time, because In the House of Stone and Light, I made it as a record that I just wanted to artistically do my thing. I didn't think it would be a commercial record. I thought maybe I'd get one chance to do something I really cared about, and so be it. You know, I wasn't a young kid. I was an older artist. So luckily around that period, there was AC radio, which was adult contemporary. You know, it was like the thoughtful music chart, supposedly. And In the House of Stone and Light was out for 2 years. When they first put it out, it absolutely flopped and did nothing at all. And nobody could really work out what to do with that record. but it was, in a way, I think I was fortunate because there were the bands that were happening at that time, like Sarah McLachlan, Bruce Hornsby. You had a sense that real music, real players could break through. And so somebody at Mercury Records, where I was signed, said, "You've got a big mouth. You should get out there and speak to as many DJs like you on the road." And they put me out on a talking tour because I'd written hits that the radio stations knew. And over a period of about a year, the song moved from 132 in the charts up to 131. Then 130, and then over 6 months, it slowly climbed and climbed and climbed. It took a year, and then it reached number one, and then it suddenly took off in the pop charts and went to I think top 14.
Yep.
And so in a way, the one person at the record company said, "I don't want to let this record fail. Martin's got a story to tell." And I think I made friends with a lot of the DJs on the road, and they realized that the song House of Stone and Light was a little bit unusual, and it was a restoration and healing song. And then once they played it, they started to get such a feedback that they didn't expect to get. So it was a very slow gestation, but when the record broke, I mean, I think it was for 2 years, it was the most played record on American radio. But it took 2 years. Yeah. So I was 122 years old when that record hit number one. So you can imagine how old I am now. Frightening.
When you look back to the 90s releases that you had, what are some of the album tracks, the deep cuts that you wish would have been singles that were near and dear to your heart?
Well, in those days, if you had one single, I knew politically as an artist, it was a great thing if you could get 2 singles from a record company or 3 singles out. So on House of Stone and Light, we were able to get like 3 singles out of a record company that was really failing at that time. I think Put On Your Red Dress on the House of Stone and Light album, my manager said that should have been a single, and we didn't put it out as a single. We put Keeper of the Flame out, and I think Light in Your Heart. And now in looking back, I think Put On Your Red Dress would have been a very strong song to have gone with. But, it's difficult when you've got a record company that even though you've got a number one song, they're not gonna take you up for the next, they were falling away. So a lot of bands were dropped, including myself, after House of Stone and Light, which was a sign of Mercury Records not going to be around past my album. But that also was a beautiful thing because it also allowed me to form my own label and put out my own individual records on my own independent label. And of course, I was an older artist then, so it wasn't so much like fashion sense or, you're a boy band that has to dance in front of the TV all the time. This was something to do with, I'd already had the hits. I'd had a little bit of track record. And so I felt quite strong that I could make records the way I wanted to. Even though I wrote a lot of hit songs for people and I grew up on pop music, my heart was really based in records like the Cocteau Twins, like the Blue Nile from Scotland, like progressive bands like Genesis and like Jethro Tull. I believe in Pink Floyd. I believed in artistry as much as hit songs. So in a way, I felt like if I'd stayed with Mercury Records and continued, maybe I wouldn't have had the freedom I had now, But if it was in my book, I'd like to have put out all 10 songs from House of Stone and Light as singles.
Yeah,
every single one should have got in the top 10. No doubt about it. No doubt.
Absolutely. We'll play a clip of some of the deep cuts on the show.
Oh, that'd be great. That'd be great.
Get a taste of that. And so what was one of your most memorable performances during that era?
Playing in Germany, actually. It's actually quite easy to answer because when House of Stone and Light, the album broke, a top promoter in Germany who'd broken Phil Collins said, "This record is so strong, we want you in Germany." And there was a real following for the music in Germany. So we got my band toured Germany for about 2 months, and we played Nuremberg on a festival. We played the Olympic Stadium. But on that album, House of Stone and Light, is a song called "The Door." It's the last song on the album, and it's about the Jewish escape from a Treblinka concentration camp in the Second World War. It's a very passionate and emotional song. I just read the story and just thought I want to write the story about how the prisoners chose the door to freedom instead of the door to the gas chamber. So it ended the album, and it was a B-side to House of Stone and Light. And when we were rehearsing that song before we went to Germany, it was really fantastic. The whole band felt like we were elevated. It was so emotional. But I remember my keyboard player saying, "Do you want to play that song in Germany? Are you sure? Are you sure about playing that to the Germans?" And I said, "I think so. I think it just feels the right thing to do." And I remember that when we played that song, we got standing ovations in Germany from the young audience of the Germans. So I don't think we'll ever forget that. And we were playing that at Nuremberg, and it was raining, and the audience just came out in the rain and just didn't, they were hiding away because there was a storm on. And then when we finished that song, they all came out and basically paid homage to it. They felt it. So I think what I remember the most touring was playing that one song to Germans who were sympathetic to the story we were telling, which is a pretty amazing thing, really.
Very, very amazing. Just the fact that that story got to be told and you made the connection with that audience, with that history. That's incredible.
My keyboard player was like, "Oh my God, I don't know if we're going to get out of here alive." And at the end, he was like, "They get it. They get it." So it was good. It was a good moment. Yeah, it was a good moment.
In 2019, you made your own podcast, from what I understand. So you are a fellow podcaster, Radio Owl's Nest.
Well, I'm not as professional as you, my dear.
Oh.
It's Radio Owl's Nest. That's why I've got the big glasses. It's Radio Owl's Nest. Great big owls.
It's exciting to chat with someone else who's involved in this medium. So
only for a short time.
Are you not doing it anymore?
Oh, no. I mean, I've only been, I started, I think, last year. So I thought I was going to do one show, and I'm up to 21 now, which to me is like a lot. But it's been fun. It's been great fun. Great fun.
Good. We can find you on all the major platforms.
It seems that way. I mean, I've got a great support system, a lady called Vanessa Levitt, who was a fan of mine who watched my first live gig in Washington. And she helped me put this up on iTunes and spread it out. It was really a whim. I just thought, I've got all these demos and all these songs that I've written all through my career that are hidden away. And I was cleaning out my house and found all the cassettes, all the DATs, and all these people I'd written with. And I just thought that would be really fun to let people hear how these songs were written, some of the hits, some of the demos that never get out, some of the work I did with Go West that people didn't hear. And I got a really positive response, particularly from songwriters, because really it's a songwriters podcast. And it was good to make people aware that there's a lot of fear in writing songs. It's not easy. You make mistakes. You write terrible songs. You write a good one. You're never sure what you've got. And so in a way, I felt it was good for me as well, because I was playing some crap to people. I was going like, this was what I thought was good in 1922. It's awful. So you can all, and so it was a way of saying to songwriters, you never stop doing it. And the more you do it, you're going to strike gold down the line, So it's been a fun podcast, with a lot of humor as well, as you can tell. We were just joking about quite a bit.
It's important to write the songs that aren't so good, because that's where the growth comes from, right? Like,
why did you say that to me? Why me?
Not you. Me. I've done it.
Are you a songwriter?
Yeah, I am too.
Oh, okay.
But that's why it's something really interesting that I want to get involved in, listening to your show and learning about the origins of your songwriting experience, because it's incredible. And I have to say, you have some of the most epic album titles. They're just incredible. When you say progressive rock, I can totally see that.
That's a Carpenter song, isn't it? It is true. It is true. I've made light of that because I read a lot, so I get very stimulated by titles. And so I recently, which we haven't put out yet, I've just done a whole show on the album In the Temple of the Muse, which is my second album after House of Stone and Light. And somebody had said, why don't you do a breakdown of that? Because I've done a 3-part series of how In the House of Stone and Light was written, recorded, and released. And then when I was doing this podcast, I thought, in the Temple of the Muse. Well, my first album was In the House of Stone and Light. I have this thing about building and architecture. There's something going on here. And so then the next album, I think I got a bit smaller. I think A Temper of Peace. Then The Slender Sadness, the love songs. Then there was another big one. My God. Hotel of the Two Worlds. I was going into mythology. So it's very ever so unusual for me because my last album is called Fugitive Pieces, just two words. So I thought, what's gone wrong here? Yeah, I'm a great fan of epic titles. And in fact, I've got an instrumental record coming out. I've got to read this. Yes, in October or November called The Occupation of Hope. Another grand title.
The Occupation of Hope sounds very timely.
I think it does, yes.
Especially
well, all my titles are timely, if you really think about it.
Yeah.
Well, but The Occupation of Hope is coming out in October and November. And then I've got a new album coming out, which I'm just finishing to mix after 5 years of work with the players that played on In House of Stone and Light, including Bill Dillon from Canada, including Russell from the band, Jan Arden's band. We had a...
Wow.
Yeah, it's been a really great project where all the players that were involved in that album have came around me about 2 years ago. Jack Hughes as well from Wang Chung. And I was trying to get Jimmy Copley on drums to play again. Unfortunately, he passed. But so Trevor Thornton, my drummer from Qville, he played on the record. And this album is called, another large title, The First and Last Freedom. Now, don't steal that. I know you're a songwriter. Don't you dare steal that.
No plagiarism on this. No. I think
Russell Broom, the Canadian guitarist Russell Broom from Jan Arden's band. He's played on that record. And
Jan Arden's right from here in my own province. So
there you go. So I can't get away from you, Canadians. You're everywhere.
We're here. We're around. Fugitive Pieces came out in April. And were you recording during the pandemic? During that time, is that like, obviously you've already had your home studio set up, but was it more creative of a time for you?
To tell you the truth, everybody sort of got worried, like, what are we going to do through this period? But I'm a bit of a hermit. I've always been locked in these rooms writing. So to me, it was a terrible situation, but to me, it didn't really change for me. It was just like, I think what it did for me, Naomi, was made me concentrate on this record I just talked about, The First and Last Freedom, where I'd had all the musicians that played on House of Stone and Light play live with me again. And that was a big deal. I had a lot to work on with that album. So I thought, I'm going to mix that record. And I was a little bit scared of that record because I had horns on it. I had live drums. I had, again, Bill Dillon, who recorded in Canada. We had Russell Broom. We had, as I said, a horn section. We had Ray Parker, because I worked on Ghostbusters, and Ray Parker played guitar on 2 tracks. So here I was recording all these players, and it was the tracks were just getting bigger and bigger. And I thought, my God, how am I going to finish this? It's wonderful to be with all the players. Neil Taylor from Tears for Fears played guitar as well. Again, he was one guy who played with House of Stone and Light. And I felt this daunting pressure to finish this record really, really well. And the Blue Nile, the Scottish band, Joseph Pulmore, the keyboard player who played on House of Stone and Light, he played on the record, sending me stuff from Glasgow. So I felt this pressure, like, these songs are pretty fantastic, but I've got to mix them. And so I used the pandemic as an excuse to work for a whole year mixing the record, which I'm just finished really about a month ago. And I think it's the best work I've done since House of Stone and Light, as my manager does, because I've just seen it as a very, very precious project, because the songs were written really through at a point when I wanted Jimmy Copley, my drummer, who was a Tears for Fears drummer who played on House of Stone and Light. I wanted to bring him over to play with me one more time. Well, he unfortunately passed away from leukemia. And he wanted to play on the record, and we kept on. I was sending him tracks in the hospital, and his girlfriend was saying, these tracks, he's going to get better. He's going to learn the tracks. Well, he never quite made it. And he talked to me about it, and he loved the tracks. And then Jack Hughes, the Wang Chung lead singer and guitarist. His wife passed from cancer and he was in town. So I said, come across and just play with me, play some music. And so this album grew out of me trying to get close to my deepest friends as they went through grief. And every time a player played on these songs which were appearing, they would say to me, this is the best stuff. The songs were just so special. And I felt a lot of pressure to do everything right. So I mixed the album over 2 years, and I couldn't be happier about it. It's so special that I don't want to put it out until next year so that I can put it out the right way. Although it's just been finished, I just feel like I want it to be put out absolutely in the perfect way. CDs, material releases, vinyl, touring, whatever. It's just too good. But I'm prolific. So it's easy for me to say The Occupation of Hope, my instrumental record's going to come just before that. But, you know, talking about House of Stone and Light and the 90s, this new record, which won't come out till next year because I want to release it properly, The First and Last Freedom, is really all the players from the House of Stone and Light period. And I feel that possibly I was writing that album in a very spontaneous, emotional place. I mean, I'm an older artist, but I think I hit a bit of a lodestone there. I hit a gold run with some of these songs because I think I was writing for my friends. With Jimmy Copley, the drummer, I wanted to, and his girlfriend said, send him some stuff to get him out of hospital, you know. And so the songs I was writing were not thought about, does everybody like this? It was like, it just has to move the players I respect. It has to move. I know how these players react. And in fact, there are 2 tracks on the album, one called Little Bird and one called Simplicity, which I knew would be perfect for Ray Parker. And I hadn't seen him since the Ghostbusters days. And so I went to his house and played him these tracks, and he just played some guitar that, my God, it was like what he played with Stevie Wonder and Boss Skaggs. It was so funky. And so I think this album, you know, when you get to my age, you think, how many more are you going to do like this, where it's, you know, like making a record with all the ingredients in, you know, because as a solo artist, you can sit at home and do everything yourself with your Pro Tools and your all your samples. But this was a bigger project. I think the hardest thing for me was to think, how do you present this record in mixing? And I thought, well, my era was Tears for Fears, you know, songs on the big chair. Simple Minds, Alive and Kicking. I want to make a record sonically that sounds musically as good as the 90s were. That's interesting. I'm on your show talking about it because it wasn't over compressed. It was made to resonate. And so as soon as I knew that I'm mixing an album which would be songs from the big chair, you know, Simple Minds, The Blue Nile, I knew I could get my teeth around this and really believe in it. So I'm talking about something I'm not going to put out till next year, but funny that it's a 90s show, and that's really how I perceived. That's to me sonically the 90s. The records were engineered perfectly, and the drums and the way that they didn't over compress and flatten out and brick wall. You had a sense of putting your hands into the music, and I wanted to create that.
More texture.
One of the hardest things today, I've got to say, Naomi, one of the hardest things today, and I'm thinking musicians, you brick wall everything when you mix a song, so you compress it so hard. And so I had to pull myself right back and go, no, it's not about volume, it's about depth, and it's about resonance, and that you can every instrument you can hear and feel, and I think that's a thing that we've lost in this era. Because of Pro Tools. More
layers of texture.
Absolutely.
Sound.
Yes.
That's fantastic. Now, do you ever still have the opportunity to record anything in analog?
Well, actually, if you look over my shoulder, you can see the 24 track there. There's a Studio 24 track. And I have all analog equipment in this room because this was where I did House of Stone and Light, in here. Next to this room is a digital room. So everything I sing through, everything that hits digital, because we have to use Pro Tools, is going through analog equipment. We're using all the vintage equipment, all the Neumann mics, all the compressors from the from the era of Neve and SSL. So everything is going, Massenburg, all the old stuff. Although my records come out on digital, everything that's processed is analog. Yeah.
I'm glad that you still have all of the equipment and that you're putting it to good use. I think that's incredible.
Oh yeah, there is no better sound than that, going through the fur and the deepness and the fog of analog. Yeah.
Well, you are an incredible songwriter. You're very inspirational to me.
Could you say that again? A bit louder.
I'm just trying to stroke your ego.
Calm yourself down.
No, but I'm very grateful to have spent this time with you.
Thank you.
It meant a lot to me.
I appreciate that. And good luck with your own songwriting.
Thank you so much.